Fine, great. He has got it started. Yes, Dr. Goa.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salil. And good afternoon, friends. I almost feel that I am barging into a wonderful course, but I'll try to do some justice in very short time, I assure you. And if at the end of my talk, if I have contributed in any small way to the success of this course, I'll be satisfied. Next, once again. So, topic is mishaps during VR surgery. No financial interest involved of my own. And as we know, despite vast amount of surgical experience accumulated over the years since the 14 gauge cutters of 1970s and till the current 27 Gs, though complication rates have gone on, where it has been on the reducing path, but it's still there. Mishaps could happen. This is a key sentence. Mishaps could happen in very trained and experienced hands because sometimes they are unexpected and unpredicted. And that's how we go on learning and leave something for posterity who do not repeat the same mistakes. That's as I was trying to point to emphasize is that currently recent retrospective analysis from the UK showed that 94 the large case series showed 94.1% had no recorded complications. And the most common complications were iatrogenic retinal tears, lens touch and iatrogenic retinal trauma. These are the some of the complications that has been enlisted which can happen at any point of time. I'll just touch upon a few important ones. Just for record's sake, it doesn't happen much. Needle track due to perivelar perforation. So a safe and effective way is, especially in axial myopia and those with anticoagulation medication, of a subtenon block. 50-50 mixture is injected, small opening is made in the subtenon space and it's injected. Very safe and effective way of administering block in certain situations. We don't administer it routinely. Straight away coming to infusion cannula related complication. As we are going more tangentially through the sclera with our trocar-cannula systems, this scenario comes up, though rarely, but still comes up. It can get stuck in the suprachoroidal space, giving rise to choroidal effusion. And it's a serious complication and it has become more prevalent. Some of my complications that we'll discuss is related to specifically to 23 gauge and some has been carried forward from the 20 gauge era. Now, partial displacement can move the instrument in the suprachoroidal space. So if you feel any unexpected resistance when passing the instrument to the cannula, do not advance. Evaluate the trocar position and in certain situations like shaving and scleral depression, be very careful. Always keep cross-checking because the cannula can retract. Now, one helpful thing is these can be interchanged. So choose a fresh site and you can interchange the cannula and sometimes the small effusion subsides on its own as the surgery progresses, not warranting any need of drainage. A recently described technique recommends switching the infusion line to one of the other and then infusion cannula is partially withdrawn, which itself drains the choroidal effusion. And so preventive at the beginning is very important to visualize the tip of the infusion cannula in the vitreous cavity prior to opening the infusion line. Some people introduce a air bubble, but anyway, inspection is enough. A well-constructed scleral wound may also prevent the dislodgement of the infusion cannula during surgery and keep checking throughout the surgery. That's the key. So besides the infusion cannula, the other trocar cannula systems cannulas also can come out. So you can try to go through the same, retrace the conjunctiva, sclera and go through the same wound or engage a fresh site after suturing the previous site. So once again to re-emphasize how to prevent the cannula, tape the infusion tube into a position that stabilizes the cannula more rigidly, making it less likely to move. Make sure that it's below the 3 or not too far below the 3 or 9 o'clock positions, and the vigilant assistance is of paramount importance. In certain situations like Marfan's, high myopes, thin sclera, be extra careful, especially you're introducing forceps doing surgery with scissors and forceps. Carefully close them before you take them out. Take some help of another instrument. ये कहाँ गई भैया कर्सर दिख नहीं रहा so I had a careful assistant was vigilant. This is the previous era where we used to reuse and these were not gilded, so this can happen. I'm losing the cursor, huh? Yeah. I'm sorry if the videos don't work at the end because there's some difficulty. That's why I wanted to connect the laptop. Anyway, let's see. So the next issue is of lens damage, lens due to lens touch and by way of infusion fluid. So a good rule of thumb to avoid lens touch is avoid crossing the center of the eye with the cutter. And if at all you have to cross the midline, do not extend anterior to the equator much. You have to avoid touching the lens. And during steps like vitreous base dissection, depress the sclera more towards the cutter. So, and caution should be exercised while lasering near the ora. Then use a lot of cryo in there. So this has reduced dramatically. We don't see this scenario much, dialysis, due to multiple insertions and because the multifunctionality of the cutter prevents these multiple entries, which can cause a lot of dialysis. Going on to peripheral breaks, that is usually, as Dr. Gadkari was also mentioning during the intervening period, during PVD induction and vitreous shaving. So if there is a partial, if you have to induce the PVD, very gradual anteriorly, and once the PVD is out, the concentration, because since we are using a lot of wide angle system, the concentration is we have to pay attention to the whole vitreous right up to the base while desensitizing the vitreous from the disc, just to avoid and apply minimal suction after a particular point. After that it has come out, then apply the suction should go down. And as a general rule, to avoid breaks and iatrogenic breaks, you could keep the cut rate high, flow rate modest while taking the port to the vitreous and not the other way around. The vitreous should not be engaged back to the port to the vitreous. Routinely we should inspect the periphery at the end of the case to ensure no such breaks has occurred. And closing the lumen as you exit the sclera, with the, sometimes we can use the light pipe to while exuding, taking out the cannulas at the end of the case, so that to keep the vitreous out of the ostium and slowly exiting. Yeah, so this is a good step. I'm grateful to Almighty. So the trocar cannula systems inherently protect against retinal tears, and the greatest concern is not to encourage the vitreous when entering the eye, especially when exiting with the instrument. And this is a step I routinely do: removal of the vitreous around the cannulas at the start. This goes a long way, as Ibarra had suggested, to prevent iatrogenic breaks. So iatrogenic macula hold during VMT surgery. While detaching the hyaloid, the surgeon is focused on the signs of vitreous separation from the disc rather than focusing also simultaneously on the traction vectors at the fovea, as the foveal tissue is stretched before finally separating, because quite often, due to some cystoid change in deroofing can occur in a case of VMT. So observe the fovea closely while detaching the hyaloid, whether in conditions where the foveal thinning is accompanied with VMT syndrome, as often is the case. During ERM peeling, iatrogenic breaks, we have to ensure that the thing is minimized. When engaging the membrane, it is important to elevate the membrane slightly, look at the traction vector forces acting while pulling, because the concavity of the posterior pole while you are removing the forceps makes the forceps go very near the retina. So while pulling, your important thing is to grasp and re-grasp. Go slow so that the end result is good. Now, the traction retinal detachment during the, you have to be very careful not to create iatrogenic breaks like here. Bimanual method with the combined forceps. I keep losing the cursor. The combined forceps and cutter, while you are exerting slight traction with the cutter. Oh, sorry, that video has not come. While you are using forceps and a cutter, you be very careful to see the traction forces. The vascular epicenters are just exposed and focal adhesions to be exposed, and the current day cutters can do a wonderful job acting like scissors to minimize collateral damages. These are rare sight nowadays, incarceration. I won't deal much with the subretinal dye which can go in. Yes, a few words about subretinal perfluorocarbon. I hope the video works, I don't know. So one should clear traction before clear the vitreous, clear all the traction before putting PFCL, as a general rule. And the PFCL level should always be below the level of the brakes, whether it's posterior brakes or peripheral brakes. And the PFCL should be very slowly injected. The recent study demonstrated that the pressurized system that we use nowadays gives us a lot of bubble formation, and these keep going inside the retina, giving rise to post-op subfoveal PFCL. So reduction of fluid flow and use of valve cannulas go a long way. in preventing this. Two interesting videos I had, not exactly of subfoveal perfluorocarbon, but also of, no, I'm so sorry. This was the video which I had shown that how I had removed a small sticky PFCl bubble with the help of DDMS, diamond dusting membrane scraper. So, the subfoveal perfluorocarbon management is described classically as we inject with a 41 gauge cannula, the same one we used to for macular translocation surgeries. BSS is injected with an additional bubble of PFCl, pushing it peripherally, and then we through another 41 gauge insertion we can suck out the PFCl bubble and do a fluid exchange and do a good job. These are one very devastating complications which can occur during surgery due to the risk factors mentioned. And main thing is momentary hypotony, especially in a case where in a eye where it was initially elevated. And this can lead to a vicious cycle of more and more suprachoroidal hemorrhage. And these are the steps in which large IOP fluctuations can occur, giving rise to suprachoroidal hemorrhage, as you can see in a B scan, kissing choroidals. Now, management is stabilize the IOP and increase the infusion pressure. And once the infusion line is checked, make sure the cannula has not entered the subretinal space. And sometimes we do drain in a supposed period of 10 to 14 days where things are supposed to liquefy, but many a times we found that it doesn't, the whole thing doesn't drain, complete drainage is not possible, clots are still there persistently. So, I just wanted to show you.
So we have completed 10 minutes, sir.
Okay, so I'll just summarize subretinal hemorrhage. No, it won't play. Bleeding during vitrectomy is very common. I'll just take 1 more minute. I think these will all be dealt with, and suprachoroidal subretinal silicone oil should also be touched. I saw a very interesting video of Pramod, suprachoroidal silicone oil, where he managed with the This is an OCT picture. Sometimes we find, this was a case in which very posterior break, the silicone oil went till in the post-op period, and giving us to this typical appearance in the OCT. Wound leak hypotony is the key, which can prevent many complications related to wound leak and hypotony. The key is to make a proper incision, and during fluid exchange also complications could take place. And I had actually shown in that video how a posterior migration of subretinal fluid can be effectively managed. These are some ancient photographs. It doesn't happen nowadays of tip breakage and phototoxicity, which can still take place. You have to be very careful because in spite of all the filters, long exposure does lead to phototoxicity. And inferior cul-de-sac is the place for subconjunctival injection, not over the sclerotomies. At the end, those pioneers who continue to proceed despite these obstacles do so with the conviction that this procedure will eventually benefit the patient. Even in spite of all these complications, we have to tackle them as they go along and benefit the patients ultimately. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Guha.